Psychological investigation operates in the complete absence of physical demonstrations for the human observer to witness. There are no anatomical specimens to dissect, no chemical precipitates to measure, and no muscular contractions to see. The entire foundation of this science relies instead on the profoundly powerful and nearly magical exchange of words. The physician and the patient interact in a clinical environment where all tangible medical evidence effectively vanishes. This intangible psychic landscape relies on reports rather than physical presence to establish its scientific truth. The validity of this realm mirrors the historical reality of Alexander the Great as recorded by ancient chroniclers, just as belief in that conqueror is sustained by the consistent reports of Diodor, Plutarch, and Arrian, so it is here. The invisible unconscious is proven through the meticulous and undeniable consistency of observed clinical phenomena. Human society maintains a deeply ingrained prejudice that actively suppresses these critical psychological findings. A fierce hostility drives this societal resistance, known as the odium sexicum, against the reality of the unconscious. This hostility specifically targets the assertion that sublimated sexual instincts form the unstable basis of all life. The collective intellect vehemently rejects the idea that these rebellious impulses underpin human cultural achievement. Human society willfully blinds itself to these psychological truths to protect its own fragile and constructed order. Acknowledging the existence of an untamed and primitive mind threatens the foundations of the established moral world. The human ego perceives this hidden apparatus as a direct danger to the sanity of the civilization it has built. Clinical observation reveals that the unconscious persists regardless of this fierce and systematic social rejection. The spoken word remains the only instrument capable of piercing the facade that hides these deep psychic structures. The physician observes the patient and notes the patterns that emerge from the void where physical evidence is absent. Every report contributes to the mapping of an unseen territory that dictates the behavior of the entire human species. This scientific endeavor demands a rigorous detachment from the conventional desire to see, touch, or measure reality. It requires the recognition that the most significant forces shaping human existence are entirely beyond direct sight. Society fears the implications of an uncontrollable unconscious because it exposes the fragility of every moral law. The struggle to recognize these forces is the central conflict in the development of a true psychological science today. The apparatus exists as a cold, mechanical reality beneath the veneer of culture and the conscious pursuit of logic. Truth is not found in the external world of objects, but in the internal depths of the forgotten and the forbidden. The clinician remains the silent witness to the manifestation of this apparatus through the medium of human speech. No amount of societal rejection can dismantle the architecture that resides within the depths of the private mind. This investigation proceeds in the silence of the clinic, where only the truth of the spoken word is allowed to stand. The hidden apparatus defines the limits of human autonomy by proving the ego is not the master of its own house. The structural reality of the unconscious remains fixed as the final frontier of human understanding and inquiry. The refusal to acknowledge these facts stems from a biological necessity to maintain the illusion of absolute control. The clinical record is the only archive of a truth that society attempts to bury beneath the weight of its own pride. The apparatus functions with a precision that defies the chaotic surface of daily life and human social performance. Every word spoken in the session serves as a beacon, illuminating the dark corridors of the individual psychic life. The foundation of psychoanalytic truth is secure because it rests on the consistency of the human internal history. The observer notes the resistance, the denial, and the eventual revelation of the primitive mind beneath the surface. The apparatus is the architecture of the human condition, and it persists despite the persistent rejection of society. The investigation continues with the patient, unearthing the mechanisms that govern the path of the human species. The final truth is that civilization is a fragile shield against the raw reality of an internal, sexualized drive. The apparatus is not an abstraction, but the literal mechanism by which the mind manages the pressure of reality. The observer accepts the silence of the patient as a part of the evidence that confirms the existence of the ghost. The scientific reality of the unconscious is established not by popular consensus, but by the weight of the evidence. This clinical truth is an iron reality that will eventually force the ego to acknowledge its primitive foundation. The work of the analyst is to translate the silent language of the psyche into a clear and objective observation. The apparatus stands as the permanent silent witness to the struggle between the biological drive and moral order. A political president stands before a crowded hall to begin a formal assembly. He opens his mouth to speak, but declares the meeting closed instead. This slip of the tongue acts as a sudden, involuntary betrayal of his internal state. He harbors an antithetical desire to terminate the proceedings immediately. The conscious intent to speak collides with a suppressed motive to escape. Every human action is a compromised negotiation between these forces. Consider the murderer who requested deadly bacterial cultures from a lab. He claimed to be testing these pathogens on mice and guinea pigs. In his formal request, he accidentally wrote that he needed them for his attempts on people. This written error exposed a lethal truth he tried to keep hidden. His true homicidal fantasy bled into reality through this slip, The unconscious mind seizes every moment of fatigue to announce itself. Sensory misreadings occur when internal preoccupations overwrite external facts. A distracted individual intends to read the German word for accepted. Instead, the mind substitutes the name of an ancient Greek king. The word Agamemnon appears in place of the intended term, angenomen. The person does not see the text as it is printed on the page. Internal desires are constantly distorting the external reality. Social propriety often forces an instantaneous suppression of words. A tourist trekking in the Dolomites discusses her physical discomfort. She wants to list the soaked items in her heavy traveling outfit. She suppresses the word drawers to maintain a sense of decorum. In the very next sentence, she mangles a word of independent content. She says Nachhause instead of the correct phrase Nachhause. The tourist mangles her speech because the suppressed word demands release. The hidden thought of drawers interferes with the unrelated sentence. These mundane errors are never accidental or merely physiological. They are highly meaningful acts forged from violent conflicts. They arise through the mutual interference of two intentions. One intention is open and conscious, while the other is suppressed. The conscious mind is constantly outwitted by an undercurrent of desires. These suppressed impulses seize every opportunity to announce their existence. They force their way into the light through slips and misreadings. These phenomena are valid psychic acts requiring rigorous investigation. We must move beyond the appearance of insignificance and superfluity. We are observing the mechanical interference of two different aims. In the case of the president, the interfering intention corrects the speech. He expresses the antithesis of the intention that he originally held. The error presents a clear conflict between two irreconcilable strivings. The desire to open the meeting is blocked by the desire to close it. The error is a compromise formation where both aims gain expression. The speaker fails in his intent, but reveals a hidden truth. We categorize these mistakes by observing the relationship of the aims. Sometimes the interfering tendency is known to the speaker beforehand. The speaker admits the judgment before the slip occurs, then suppresses it. The suppressed tendency indemnifies itself by changing the intended speech. In other cases, the subject is completely ignorant of the interference. They may even deny that the interfering tendency is active at all. The third group of errors involves an absolutely impolite disavowal. The speaker insists that the interfering motive is entirely alien to him. Yet the psychoanalyst holds fast to the interpretation of the slip. The suppression of an intention is the indispensable condition for errors. The interfering intention must first be interfered with to manifest. This is the mechanical reality behind our daily verbal failures. The conscious ego is not the absolute master of its own house. It is constantly compromised by the rebellious and primitive impulses. These tendencies remain active, despite being excluded from conscious life. They wait in the dark until they can disrupt our intended actions. We must recognize these errors as signposts of our psychic structure. Every slip of the tongue is a window into a hidden war of forces. A young child lies in bed, eyes closed, drifting into the deep stillness of the night. Sleep settles over the small, fragile frame like a heavy blanket. The mind begins its nightly task of protecting the tranquility of rest from any disruptive stimuli. The dream emerges as a biological guardian, hallucinating the fulfillment of ungratified daytime wishes. In the simple, transparent dreams of childhood, this process is entirely laid bare for the observer. A 22-month-old boy receives a gift of cherries, but the adults forbid him to eat them. Throughout the night, he hallucinates the act of consuming them all, satisfying his hunger and his desire. Another example appears in a 5-year-old boy who feels deep disappointment after a failed hike. He dreams of successfully reaching the summit of the Simony Hütte on the massive Dachstein mountain. These clear visions prove that sleep functions to maintain the comfort of the psychic state by satisfying desires. Extreme physical deprivation forces the unconscious to generate these survival fantasies to protect the body. Starving explorers lost on the Antarctic ice face the agonizing sharp edge of extreme hunger. Imprisoned men like Mungo Park and Trenck suffer under the cruel conditions of their long, forced isolation. Their unconscious minds endlessly hallucinate magnificent multi-course banquets to prevent the physical agony from waking them. These vivid internal feasts serve the vital purpose of preserving the fragile, vulnerable state of sleep itself. In adulthood, however, the direct expression of these primitive wishes meets a more complex and difficult reality. Unacceptable desires are severely mutated by an internal mechanism known as the dream censor. This guardian operates exactly like a political newspaper censor that leaves blank white spaces on a page. It forces authors to use obscure circumlocutions or vague language to hide the true meaning of the text. The censorship mechanism is clearly exposed in the dream of an elderly lady experiencing a deep internal conflict. She harbors a shocking fantasy of offering services of love to the troops stationed at Military Hospital No. 1. Her mind abruptly replaces this explicit sexual confession with the sound of indistinct murmuring from the officers. This censorship effectively obliterates the unacceptable confession while allowing the rest of the dream to continue undisturbed. The dream is not a theater of random chaos, but a highly regulated mechanism of the sleeping mind. It is a tool designed to discharge biological and psychological tension while preserving the vulnerable state of rest. The dreaming mind exerts control over its impulses, distorting the content to bypass the moral guardrails of the ego. Every dream serves as a compromise, balancing the primitive drive with the necessary constraints of civilized adult life. The mind acts as a vigilant protector, ensuring that the necessary physical rest remains uninterrupted by the demands of desire. By transforming raw impulses into symbols, the brain allows the individual to sleep soundly, shielded from the intensity of forbidden thoughts. The internal landscape of the dreamer is a carefully managed space where the unconscious continues its work behind a veil of images. Through this complex process of mutation and substitution, the psyche sustains its existence during the long, dark hours of rest. The dream remains a vital, protective function of our biological nature, safeguarding the quietude of our physical lives. It is the essential mechanism that allows the human organism to navigate the tension between desire and the necessity of sleep. The dense veil of childhood amnesia obscures the first 5 years of human life. It leaves behind only trivial, disguised memories that selectively conceal the intensely formative experiences of early development. These memories act as mere screens, hiding the emotionally explosive events of those foundational years. The dream work possesses the power to bypass this amnesia with precision. It reveals forgotten figures from the past with absolute clarity. A dreamer may suddenly perceive the exact physical dimensions of a short, stout, one-eyed physician from their 3rd year. Such vivid recollections pierce the shroud of lost time to expose the roots of current psychological states. Latent dream thoughts reveal a survival of primitive infantile egoism that persists in the mind. They expose long-buried death wishes directed at rival siblings or parents that remain active. These unconscious impulses mirror the raw, unfiltered jealousy observable in nursery conflicts between young children. The unconscious mind represents a literal regression to the forgotten and fiercely egoistic epoch of human infancy. This period remains locked within the dark recesses of the psyche, waiting for the nocturnal mind to resurface. Early human sexuality operates free from the later impositions of disgust, incest taboos, and strict anatomical boundaries. It presents a polymorphously perverse landscape where the pursuit of organic pleasure dominates the mental life entirely. The infant mind lacks the ethical structures that govern adult social behavior and restricts modern human interaction. These archaic impulses survive intact within the unconscious, despite the civilizing pressures exerted by society. The dream work serves as the primary vehicle for navigating this hidden, enduring foundation of all adult architecture. It translates these ancient drives into the visual imagery that populates the dreaming life of the adult individual. The mind reconstructs the nursery environment through these distorted, archaic fantasies during the deepest hours of the night. Every nightmare contains the echoes of these early developmental struggles, stripped of their later moral coatings. The terrifying or evil content of adult nightmares loses its moral weight when viewed through this historical lens. Such visions are revealed merely as a nocturnal regression to the primitive, ethically untethered origins of human development. The unconscious remains a reservoir for these archaic remnants that the conscious mind has long since abandoned. The structural integrity of the adult ego depends upon the successful integration or repression of these early, chaotic forces. When the ego falters, these remnants break through the surface, manifesting as irrational anxieties or repetitive nocturnal visions. The psyche constantly negotiates with these buried layers to maintain the fragile order of conscious existence. Childhood amnesia serves a protective function, creating a necessary distance between the rational adult and the primitive ego. The dream work, however, ignores this distance, drawing directly from the well of infantile experience to construct its reality. This relentless return to the past demonstrates that the adult mind never truly abandons its earliest psychological configuration. The architecture of the personality is built upon a foundation that is fundamentally non-linear and stubbornly archaic in nature. One cannot understand the complexity of the adult condition without acknowledging this persistent regression into the infantile. The psychic apparatus remains bound to its origins, anchored by the intense emotional charges of those first, unremembered years. The study of the dream work provides the only reliable map for traversing this forgotten terrain of the human mind. Neurotic individuals dwell in a state of stagnant imprisonment. They remain chained to specific and unresolved traumas from the past. These sufferers exhibit a paralyzing fixation on historical events. This condition mirrors soldiers enduring traumatic war neuroses. Such veterans are doomed to endlessly relive a battlefield disaster. The traumatic moment recurs constantly within their nightly sleep. Physical compulsions act as disguised monuments to these traumas. A separated woman forces her maid to stand near a large table. She carefully arranges a cover over the table in a precise way. This is a direct and unconscious theatrical repetition of her night. That specific bridal night remains a source of immense distress. The symptoms survive because their origins remain hidden in memory. Amnesia covers the formative events that birthed the neurosis today. A young girl exhibits an obsessive bedtime ritual every single night. She forces her mother to leave and keeps the bedroom doors open, This behavior stems from an unacknowledged infantile desire today. The child possesses an irrational wish to exclusively own her father. The therapeutic extraction of this pathogenic ignorance is difficult. This process meets a violent and highly tenacious internal barrier. Such resistance proves that mere intellectual understanding is not enough. Logic alone cannot shatter the unconscious forces defending neurosis. Human beings suffer a profound psychological demotion in this light. The conscious ego is not the master of its own internal house. This realization mirrors the cosmological insult provided by Copernicus. It also mirrors the biological insult delivered by Darwin long ago. The mind remains a territory governed by forces beyond conscious control. Ancient traumas dictate the present movements of the neurotic subject. The past refuses to remain buried in the depths of the psyche now. It demands constant reenactment through the structure of daily habit. These individuals remain locked inside the monasteries of their history. The present moment is merely a stage for repeating old grievances. There is no escape from the grip of these ancient psychic chains. Every action is an echo of a trauma that cannot be named or seen. The ego struggles against these ghosts that haunt the quiet halls. Life becomes a rhythmic cycle of compulsive and meaningless acts. The mind seeks to bridge the gap between memory and the current reality. Yet it only succeeds in building a cage of symbolic repetition daily. The individual remains a spectator to their own psychological decay. Reality is filtered through the lens of a long-forgotten tragedy. The unconscious mind dictates the terms of this strange existence. There is no liberation without facing the raw truth of the past. Yet the defense mechanisms work tirelessly to hide these true roots. The sufferer remains oblivious to the mechanics of their own misery. Every ritual is a desperate attempt to resolve a conflict that remains. The conflict is eternal, and the resolution remains perpetually out. This is the tragic fate of the soul trapped in neurotic stasis. The individual is a passenger in a vessel steered by dead hands. Memory is a labyrinth where the conscious mind is eternally lost. The walls are lined with monuments to failures of the past era. There is no exit from this internal prison of the human spirit. The past is the architect of the present and the future mind. This structural necessity defines the limits of human autonomy now. The ego is a minor actor in a drama written by ancient shadows. Reality is compromised by the weight of these invisible pressures. History acts as a permanent anchor on the functioning of the self. The mind is a relic of its own developmental and dark history. Understanding is the only tool against this tide of dark memory. But the tide is strong, and the shore is perpetually receding now. This constitutes the final and brutal reality of the human psyche. The The sexual libido evolves through perilous stages throughout human life. Fixation occurs if developmental elements are left behind in the process. This resembles migrating ancient peoples, abandoning vulnerable groups. It also mirrors male seminal glands, failing their descent from the abdomen. The etiology of neurosis requires both external denial and internal veto. Consider the differing fates of a janitor's daughter and a rich girl. They both share identical childhood sexual games during their youth. Only the wealthy girl develops a neurosis as an adult in the world. Her heavily educated, moral ego violently rejects her true sexuality. The relentless biological drive of the libido is a phylogenetic legacy. It bears traces of primeval animal ancestry from the distant past. Genital apparatuses were once linked to the mouth or to locomotion. The ego instincts swiftly adapt to the harsh dictates of reality. They follow the logic of evolutionary necessity to ensure survival. Sexual instincts remain obstinate despite these external pressures. They initially satisfy themselves through purely autoerotic means. They violently resist the rigid logic of the external material world. The mental apparatus is a battlefield of intense structural tension. The sexual libido seeks primitive discharge at any possible cost. The moral ego imposes strict limitations based on cultural norms. This structural war defines the human condition within the psyche. Neurosis detonates from this war between libido and the moral ego. It is not merely an external infection invading the human mind. The pathology represents the catastrophic cost of our own evolution. Civilization demands the suppression of nature for societal order. This creates an irreconcilable conflict within the individual mind. The ego attempts to balance these primitive drives with moral life. The failure of this balance leads to the collapse into neurosis. Every clinical manifestation is a symptom of this internal struggle. The intensity of the conflict depends on the ego's level of demand. Harsh internal standards heighten the risk of severe mental illness. The libido remains a volatile force beneath the surface of the ego. It is a biological imperative that refuses to be fully silenced. The psyche is forced to navigate this dangerous and hidden terrain. Each individual existence is marked by these fundamental pressures. The struggle is the defining characteristic of our mental structure. We are built upon the foundation of this irreconcilable dichotomy. The mind is a machine designed to resolve impossible contradictions. It functions as a vessel for these deep and archaic biological forces. The history of the individual is written in these sexual conflicts. Every neurosis tells the story of this failed internal negotiation. The ego is a fragile structure against the weight of the libido. The suppression of nature remains the price of our modern civilization. We carry this archaic animal inheritance within our very anatomy. The path of development is littered with these hidden structural risks. A minor failure in early stages can derail the entire process. This is the mechanical reality behind the veneer of human conduct. The truth is found in the clash of these incompatible instincts. Our lives are shaped by this internal topography of constant war. The mind stands as an uneasy monument to this structural evolution. We are prisoners of our own complex and rigid moral architecture. The conflict persists long after the initial developmental trauma. It echoes through the symptoms that define the neurotic condition. We remain subjects of this deep and ancient biological compulsion. The psyche is a map of these unyielding and primitive forces. We must understand this war to grasp the mechanics of the mind. It is a fundamental truth of our internal and biological nature. A singular, translucent organism floats in a silent, primordial sea of liquid energy. It extends delicate, shifting pseudopodia into the surrounding void to latch onto external objects. The protoplasm flows outward, seeking connection, yet remains anchored to a central mass. This microscopic vessel oscillates in a rhythm between outward surrender and inward collapse. The psychic apparatus functions through this fluid economy of energy, constantly shifting its focus between the world and the solitary self. Libidinal energy behaves precisely like this simple protoplasmic entity in its daily biological cycles. During natural sleep, the mind enacts a total regression to the earlier stage of primary narcissism. All object libido is completely retracted from the external world, leaving the individual in a state of blissful, intrauterine isolation. The external world is effectively obliterated as the energy flows back into the central mass of the ego. This daily withdrawal provides the biological foundation for psychic restoration and the nature of exhaustion. In profound psychoses like dementia praecox, this retreat becomes a permanent and irreversible structural collapse. The libido abandons all external objects forever, flooding the ego with a dangerous concentration of trapped energy. This internal deluge manifests violently as megalomania, delusions of grandeur, and a detachment from reality. The mind, starved of its healthy engagement with the outside world, becomes a prisoner of its own self-inflation. The individual remains a transient biological vessel, a temporary appendage to an immortal germplasm. Human existence is caught in a rhythmic, economic oscillation between the altruistic surrender of love and the self-preserving retreat of egoism. Narcissism is the necessary libidinous complement to egoism, serving as the variable element in the psyche. While one can be egoistic and still maintain strong libidinous occupation of objects, narcissism determines the intensity of the need for them. An individual might be excessively narcissistic, having very slight need for an object, either for sexual satisfaction or for the higher forms of love. When an individual falls completely in love, the altruistic transformation from egoism to the sex object often creates an internal clash. The sex object draws upon itself a portion of the ego's narcissism, leading to the phenomenon known as sexual overestimation. In this state, the sex object becomes all-powerful, effectively sucking up the ego into its own orbit. This poetic contrast between the magnetic pull of the self and the external lure of love defines the fundamental tension of human relationships. The unconscious mind operates independently even when the ego attempts to withdraw for sleep, retaining control over residual energies. It utilizes this nocturnal pause in the senses' activity to fashion forbidden wishes from fragments left over from the day. Organic diseases and inflammatory irritations further force the libido to abandon its objects and focus inward upon the affected body part. This mechanism explains the origins of hypochondria, where an organ occupies the ego in a similar way without displaying actual physical disease. The human psychological journey reveals itself as an endless pulsation between the vital necessity to connect with the external world and the primal, magnetic pull back into the solitary self. This rhythmic motion governs every facet of mental life, from the deepest reaches of the unconscious to the most complex constructions of the ego. The mind is a dynamic vessel that can never remain static, forever forced to balance the safety of isolation against the risks of attachment. The oscillation is the engine of existence, driving the individual through a lifelong cycle of outward movement and inward return. The script was based on the book, A General Introduction to Psychoanalysis, authored by Sigmund Freud and first published in 1917. Thank you for watching. Until the next journey begins.